Hello, and welcome to Fusion Writing, where building character meets creating structure. Well, this is our second week in the development of our topics, and Victoria has promised us a very exciting program today. Victoria, take it away.
Okay, so let's talk world building. Last week we talked about a hard world. A hard world follows linear logic, it follows identifiable rules, it has natural laws, the characters are governed by the world, it's very constructed, and it's very consistent. There's not a lot of room for wiggling around in the reader's imagination when you're writing in a hard world story. The contrast to that is a soft world. Some of the stories that come to mind when you think of a soft world are in the genre of story noir. So things are just suggested, or things are left just outside of the frame of description in the text so that the reader has the luxury of using their own imagination to fill in the details. So what does that look like? Well, first of all, soft worlds are very atmospheric. Sometimes they're very based in weather, they're based in color, sometimes they're based in other senses, like maybe memory. They have a sense of haze or fog to them, which is by contrast to a hard world where everything is defined out. Sometimes when you write a hard world story, you spend years figuring out all the things, the government, the culture, the languages, you know everything. In a soft world, you leave those things up to your dear reader to bring to the text with them. Another hallmark is just making suggestions. This is a powerful soft world building tool. Rather than lining out all of those details and making all the decisions for your reader before they ever dive into the story, you're just making suggestions. That way, your reader can bring their own inclinations, their own fascinations, their own interests. All of those things come from within them, and they just meet the text where it is and let those things fill in for themselves, which is a cool thing because that means your story can mean something different to each reader because everyone who approaches your text is different. So that's what makes soft world stories often very appealing, because your soft world reader likes to be able to bring their own imagination and fascination to that text rather than having it all defined out for them. Another hallmark is the details of how and why aren't as important as the philosophical or the emotional questions. So rather than this is how things work and this is why things function that way and this is the consequence of it, those things are kind of left to imagination, and instead the story asks you philosophical questions or ethical questions, or maybe it dives into an emotion. So that leads us to the final key piece, which is a soft world story is generally character driven. So rather than having a hard world that your character is inserted into and that world governs everything that they do, in a soft world, the world is just a backdrop. It's like a watercolor that your character exists against, and it's always kind of fuzzy around the edges. The cool thing about that is without those hard structured details to govern the story, in a soft world, your character can really dive into things like emotion or introspection or some kind of growth that's not really tangible in a real way. Maybe it's just a mental shift, a perspective shift. Often a soft world story is a quieter story. So if you are one of my non-linear story writers that's not all about crazy extreme plotting and knowing everything that happens and having it all lined out, perhaps you are a soft world builder and you approach writing from a more emotional or a more philosophical place. Whichever way you are, I would encourage you to experiment with both. It doesn't matter what direction you come from, but often you'll find you'll use elements from each one. Maybe a character is super defined, super dialed in. Maybe you've dialed in those character traits very specifically and you know everything about this character. That would be a hard build. But then maybe the backdrop that that character exists against is more philosophical or more of a soft world. There's a million ways that you can toggle these things around and make them interplay with your characters. So I encourage you to take a little time and think about what each world might look like for you, and then start sketching that stuff out, because when we get to next week, I'm going to take you through how to Zettelkasten these two things so that you have them at hand when we get to writing week 4. So with that, I will send it back over to Kathleen.
Oh, thank you, Victoria. Now I know what a soft world is. How fascinating. Well, we all get to bring our imaginations to reading, which is one of the reasons I like to read rather than watch a movie, because I don't want to have the exact face of the character given to me. I want to imagine the characters for myself. But imagine being able to imagine the whole world is a pretty exciting idea. Well, this week we're going to be talking a little bit more deeply into affability. And since soft worlds are very much about emotions, we're going to be talking about the emotions that are associated with affability. We're going to talk about the emotions of the victory state, the emotions of the loss state, and a little bit about what those voices are sounding like in the mind of the character who has possibly issues with affability, if it's in the wing or the pinnacle, or maybe he's very solid with affability and it's in the anchor or even in the base. So we're going to find out what goes on differently in the mind of the character, in the emotions of the character, in the heart of the character who has affability in these different character positions. So let's take a step back very briefly and review the definition of affability. Affability is about one's basic demeanor towards the outside world. It's always phrased in a positive direction. So affability is being pleasant, having a pleasant approach to others, and being basically approachable, where others will look at this person and say, "Oh, could you tell me which aisle the eggs are on?" And that they would feel comfortable asking you or your character because the character has that look about them of being approachable. Of course, as we talked about that last week, sometimes roles mean that not quite as approachable as you would think. Some strictness might be necessary, but also not hard strictness, but readiness, if need be, to relax and really listen and pay attention. Because now, when we expand it a little bit and we turn back the curtain, what we discover what's going on in the mind of the person who's feeling affability or not feeling very affable. What are those voices saying? Now, the affability voice is looking out at other people, recognizing them as human beings. Maybe the affable person is just looking and saying, "Oh, what a beautiful baby. Oh," and the mother looks so contented. Or they're observing other people with charitable thoughts in their heart. Whereas maybe the less affable person might possibly be looking at other people judgmentally, but in reality, it's much more likely that the person who is not at all affable just looks out and doesn't even see human beings out there. They just see roadblocks. "Oh, I've got to get to the ketchup aisle, and there's a cart in the way." So there's a whole question of what does it sound like in the user's head? Let's take a look at one specific loss state. Loss states are in the wing, and they generally produce chaos. Well, if a character, maybe he's the boss of a department in a company, if that character does not see the other people as human beings, why put a filter on what's going on in their head? If they're in a crummy mood, guess what? The people get the crummy face. If they happen to be exceptionally happy for some reason, well, maybe they'll put on a pleasant face today. But it's not on behalf of anybody that's out there, because they almost have the feeling that they're the only human being in the world. Those others, what? Then you get to a decision to be made because someone might come into their area that's important to them. "Ooh, my boss." Or, "Ooh, the girl I would like to take out." Suddenly you've got someone that they're willing to think of as hopefully a human being, but maybe just as an important instrument to them. You don't even know how far that non-humanness goes. But now there's a choice to be made. "Oh, I better be affable. I'd like to ask her out someday, so I better have a smile on my face every time I meet her." So this kind of optionality is one of the clear signs that you don't have genuine affability. Genuine affability is just routinely pleasant. But if you're picking and choosing who gets the affable face, you've got affability in the wing. And if you're just coming out there, if your character just comes out there and just blasts the world with whatever's going on, chances are affability is in the pinnacle position. Affability, when it's in the anchor in the base, just makes for such a more comfortable life for the person and the others around them. And this is very nice for real life, but sometimes when it comes to story, it can be a little boring because story, you want a little bit of adventure. So if you want to calm your story down, put an affable character in there to settle everything down. Then when it's time to make things a little crazier, send in, you might even think of him as a clown, send in the person who has no idea of what is or isn't pleasant. They just come out with whatever is in their mind. So think about that. Now, the voice of rudder. What about the voice of decision? When would your normal, basically affable person have to make a choice to be affable? When would they have to give themselves a pep talk to be affable? Well, it's pretty easy. What if the person isn't feeling very well? They had to come to the office because the responsibility was such that they needed to be there. Maybe they aren't contagious, they got sinus or whatever. They're there because they have to be there, and they might give themselves a talking to. Okay, I'm not feeling very good today, but by golly, I'm going to be nice and pleasant to all the people around me. That's an example of where a decision might have to be made for someone who is basically has an affable disposition. So play with these character traits, and when it comes around to the writing in 2 more weeks, we'll give you some more of a specific prompt for how you can write them into a story. And next week, we'll be talking about how to write them into your Zettelkasten. So what can you add to this, Victoria?
Well, again, as always, we fit perfectly together. I love the idea of introducing an affable character as a way to calm the story down, to bring that story tension down. That's exactly what we're talking about when we're talking about the different kinds of worlds that you're building. If you're building a soft world, you're bringing in that kind of a character because they're dialing that stuff down just a little bit and they're influencing the world. Whereas if you're using the other kind of a character who's very defined, who's like a bull in a china shop, that is a very different vibe. It's a different feeling. So I think playing with affability is a terrific soft world strategy because just as you've lined it out, it gives you a lot of different directions that you can go with how you sprinkle that into those characters. So definitely start playing with it, guys. You got nothing to lose but learning your characters that much better. But most importantly, where can people find us?
Oh, come on over to LiLLiPub.org. This is where we hang out when we're not on YouTube, sharing the character traits and story building with you. LiLLiPub.org. And especially every Saturday, we have wonderful Zoom calls where we get together. We share our writing, we give each other helpful tips, and we just have a great time. So LiLLiPub.org is your place to be. See you over there. Bye-bye.